Ever feel it? Sometimes the world runs on like duct tape and prayers. I mean, one minute my smart fridge is ordering groceries online, which is great.
Yeah.
The next, it's suggesting I invest in Bitcoin and Mandarin. It's like, what is going on in there?
You'd be surprised how often these systems uh, actually are held together by a lot more than just duct tape and prayers.
Right.
There's a whole field dedicated to this,
Yeah.
to understanding why systems fail, and more importantly, how to make them more, you know, reliable and robust.
Yeah, it's a whole science, and that's what we're going to dive into today.
Absolutely.
The world of system dependability.
Yeah.
And we're using the Maintenance Audits Handbook as our guide, right?
Oh, yeah.
Specifically Chapter 5, which gets into, the nitty-gritty, the nuts and bolts of RAM's parameters. So reliability, availability, maintainability, and safety.
That's right.
Now, I got to be honest, before we even get to measuring these things, I'm kind of like, what are we even talking about here? What does it even mean for a system to be dependable?
That's a great question, and it's really where the definitions are key. And the handbook, interestingly, starts with that seemingly basic question. What does dependability even mean? And they actually cite the International Electrotechnical Commission, or the IEC, and their definition, maybe surprisingly specifically, excludes safety. They actually focus more on a system's ability to operate basically on its availability, reliability, maintainability, and capacity.
Okay, hold on. Why would safety be left out of that? Isn't that like priority number one when we're talking about systems, especially complex systems?
It's a really interesting quirk of history. So dependability theory, as its own field, really got its start in fields like aerospace and nuclear power.
High stakes.
Super high stakes, where, a plane or a power plant failing has huge consequences, so safety is paramount. But as the field kind of expanded, it became clear that dependability applies to way more than just those life-or-death systems.
So like my smart fridge ordering kiwi fruit at 3 a.m., not exactly a safety hazard.
No. Thankfully not yet. Give it time.
But it does make you question, like, the reliability of that system, right?
Exactly. And that's where this other definition of effectiveness kind of comes in. And it really focuses on probability.
Mm-hmm.
So the likelihood that a system can meet those demands under specific conditions within a time frame. And it acknowledges that nothing is perfect.
Yeah.
Things will go wrong. The question is, how likely is it, and what's the impact?
So it's not just if a system will work, but how well it works, for how long, and under what circumstances. Okay.
Yeah,
That's a lot to consider.
absolutely.
And what this makes me realize, too, is that it's not just about the machines, it's about the humans involved, too, right?
Totally. The handbook makes a really good point of saying, it's not just about the technology. It's about all the players involved.
Yeah.
The designers, the manufacturers, the operators, even the folks who write, the instruction manuals.
Oh, yeah.
They all play a really crucial role in that overall dependability.
Right.
Because you could have, like, a flawlessly engineered machine,
Mm-hmm.
but if the operator has no idea how to use it properly or misinterprets the instructions, things can go wrong real quick.
It's like that saying, you're only as strong as your weakest link, right?
Exactly.
So how do we get a handle on all these different factors? And that's where I'm guessing this RAMS acronym comes in.
Yeah, so the book uses this really helpful visual. It's figure 5.2 to show how reliability, availability, maintainability, and safety, how they all, interlink. They're not separate. They're all interconnected. Different aspects of a system's performance.
And what I think is really neat is how the book breaks down each of these elements. So like, take maintainability, for instance. It's not just about how easy something is to fix, but it's like the probability of effective maintenance happening within a certain time frame.
Exactly.
It's wild. And then there's reliability. And again, what I thought was interesting is that the book really emphasizes that this is always tied to specific operating conditions.
Right.
A system might be incredibly reliable in a controlled lab setting,
Right.
but throw in some extreme temperatures, some humidity, user error, and suddenly that reliability, poof, it's gone.
Out the window.
Exactly.
It's like saying a car is reliable, but not mentioning if you're, driving it on a paved road or off-roading in the mountains.
Right. Context is key.
Absolutely.
But ultimately, it sounds like it all comes down to availability.
Yeah.
It's not just about whether a system can work, but if it's actually working when you need it. That's the real measure of dependability, it seems like.
I think so, yeah.
So how do we actually dive deeper into each of these RAMS elements? Let's start with reliability. What does it actually mean for a system to be reliable? And what are those factors that can really make or break that reliability?
So when we talk about reliability, what we're really talking about is probability over time. And the handbook actually cites the IEC definition here, which is that it's the probability that a system operates satisfactorily during a determined period of time and in specific conditions of use.
So it's kind of like me saying, my car is totally reliable, as long as I only drive it on Sundays under 55 miles an hour and never when it rains.
Pretty much. Yeah, I mean, that's maybe a bit of an extreme example, but it highlights how crucial those operating conditions are to even understanding reliability in the first place.
Right.
And the handbook breaks it down into those 4 key aspects, right?
Yeah.
So you've got the probability, you've got that idea of satisfactory operation, the time element, and then those all-important operating conditions.
Yeah.
And if you're missing one of those, you've got, well, a recipe for disaster,
Yeah.
or at least one frustrated user.
For sure. So, okay, we talked about operating conditions, but what are some of the other things that can actually impact a system's reliability? What else is there?
Well, I mean, honestly, the human element is huge.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
The handbook goes into, how human error can play a role, everything from like straight up operator mistakes
Yeah.
to, instructions that are poorly written and lead to people misunderstanding.
Right.
And then there's also just the environment the system's operating in.
Oh, right.
So extreme temperatures, humidity, even something as simple as like dust buildup,
Yeah.
that can all have a huge impact.
It's funny, all the things you don't even think about until suddenly, boom, system failure. Like, oh yeah, dust, who knew?
Right.
I'm suddenly a lot more sympathetic to the IT guy who shows up with a can of compressed air now.
Right. Exactly.
Essential worker.
Absolutely. Yeah. And let's not forget about software.
Oh, right.
Because, I mean, software bugs can be a major, major source of unreliability in a system.
Makes sense.
And as systems get more and more, interconnected and complex, that potential for software issues just grows exponentially. It's like this domino effect. One little glitch in the code and boom, suddenly it's impacting the entire system.
Speaking of domino effects, the book mentions something called the bathtub curve, which, okay, that sounds a little ominous. What is that all about?
So it's actually a visual representation.
Okay.
It's a way to kind of understand how those failure rates can actually change over a system's lifespan.
Okay.
So you picture a bathtub, right?
Yeah.
And at the very beginning, the curve kind of dips down. That represents a higher rate of like initial failures.
Okay.
Which makes sense. I mean, often that's due to like manufacturing defects or some design flaw that just, gets weeded out early on.
Oh, okay. So kind of like how a brand new phone might have some glitches that a software update will fix, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Exactly. And then the curve kind of flattens out. That's that useful life phase, that sweet spot where the system's generally at its most reliable. But then as time goes on, that curve starts creeping back up. And that's wear and tear. That's where you get into the wear out phase, and that risk of failure increases again.
Okay, so knowing about this bathtub curve, is there anything we can do with this information? Or is this just like us knowing that, like, oh, well, at some point everything fails, so why even bother?
No, and that's the thing. Knowing about the bathtub curve lets us be proactive.
Okay.
So, for example, if we know that, hey, those failure rates are higher early on, that might lead us to invest more in testing and quality control during manufacturing.
Right.
Or, realizing that, okay, this system's getting up there in age, it's entering that wear out phase. That might mean scheduling more frequent maintenance
Okay.
so that you're preventing that major failure down the line.
So it's like getting ahead of the curve, literally.
Exactly.
I like it. Okay, so we talk about keeping those systems running reliably, but what about the other side of that? Keeping them well maintained.
Maintainability, right. It's like the unsung hero of dependability. It's something we don't always think about, but it's so crucial to have systems that are designed to be, easily maintained. Yeah, I think that's true. We often focus so much on preventing the failures in the first place that we kind of forget about, well, what happens when those failures occur?
Right.
And a system that's designed with maintainability in mind, that's going to be back up and running so much faster.
Yeah.
You minimize that downtime, you minimize frustration. It's all about how efficiently can we get things back on track when they do
Sure.
inevitably go wrong.
For sure. And the handbook actually, it uses some pretty technical terms here. We're talking MTBM, MTTR, MDT. Can you break those down for us a little bit?
Yeah, so you can think of these as like tools for measuring those different aspects of maintainability.
Okay.
Right? So you got MTBM, that's your mean time between maintenance.
Okay.
So that tells you how often, on average, a system needs some attention.
So if my trusty coffee machine has an MTBM of like 6 months, that means every 6 months I should probably, give it a good cleaning, a little checkup, something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it helps you anticipate those maintenance needs. And then you've got MTTR, or mean time to repair. And that measures how long it takes, on average, to actually get a system back up and running
Right.
once it does fail.
Okay.
So shorter MTTR, the better.
Mm.
Nobody wants that downtime dragging on and on.
Especially not when it comes to the coffee machine.
Exactly. Exactly.
So then what about MDT? Where does that one fit in?
Right. So MDT, that's your mean downtime. And basically, that represents the total time that a system is unavailable, due to that maintenance or those repairs.
Okay.
So it takes into account both frequency of those downtimes, right, that MTBM,
Yeah.
but also their duration, that MTTR.
Oh, okay.
So ideally, you want to minimize all three, less maintenance overall, quicker repairs when you need them, and then minimal overall downtime.
Okay, so it's kind of like a balancing act between these different factors.
Yeah.
But why does it all matter so much? Is it really just about, saving time and saving money? Or is there more to it than that?
I mean, those are definitely important factors. Predictable maintenance means predictable costs. And for any business, that's huge. But I think beyond that, good maintainability really contributes to just smoother operations overall.
Right.
When systems are well maintained, they're less likely to fail unexpectedly.
Mm.
And, on those occasions when they do require attention, those repairs are faster. They're less disruptive.
So it's like going to the doctor for, or a regular checkup.
Exactly.
Catch those small problems early on, and you can prevent bigger issues down the line.
100%, yeah. And that actually brings us back to, kind of the ultimate goal here.
Yeah.
Availability.
Right. Because, what good is a system that can work if it's not actually up and running when you need it to be? Right.
Exactly.
And the handbook really dives into all these different types of availability: instantaneous, average, asymptotic. Why so many distinctions? Why do we need all these different ways of measuring availability?
Because it's not one size fits all, right?
Yeah.
It really depends on the context. So you've got your instantaneous availability, and that's really just about that specific moment in time. Is it operational right now? Think of an air traffic control system. That needs to be available 24/7, no exceptions.
Yeah, those are high stakes.
Very high stakes.
Yeah.
That's instantaneous availability in action.
Wow. Okay, so then average availability, when does that one come into play?
Right, so average availability, that's looking at a longer time frame.
Huh.
So what percentage of the time is the system operational on average?
Okay.
And that's helpful for systems that, might have some scheduled downtime for maintenance, for upgrades.
Right.
So, think about a website, for example. It might have some planned downtime, maybe overnight, which impacts its average availability.
Right.
But that might not necessarily be a deal breaker.
Right. Right.
It all depends.
Different strokes.
Yeah.
Okay, so then asymptotic availability, that
Yeah.
sounds very theoretical.
Yeah, that one is a bit more theoretical. You're right. So asymptotic availability is what the system would theoretically reach over an infinitely long period, assuming everything's perfect.
Right.
So it's more of a benchmark or an ideal, something to sort of aim for.
Okay. So something to strive for. Even if we know in the real world 100% availability is probably not going to happen.
Right, exactly.
So then how do we even know how available our systems actually are?
Well, that's where data comes in.
Okay.
The handbook talks about the importance of having a really robust information management system to keep track of all things RAMs.
Okay.
So we're talking databases, both qualitative and quantitative, that can really capture the details of when those failures occur, how long those repair times are, the maintenance schedules, everything.
Right.
And having that data allows us to actually spot trends, identify those weak points, and make much more informed decisions about how we improve that system performance.
So it's not even just about fixing things when they break. It's about using that data to try to prevent the breakdown from happening in the first place.
Exactly. And that's where I think things get really, really interesting, because the handbook talks about applying something called the Pareto principle to failure reporting.
Yeah.
You might know it as the 80-20 rule.
Oh, yeah. Like 80-20 rule. Yeah. The idea that 80% of the effects come from 20% of the causes, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. I've heard of that. How does that actually apply to, system failures?
So it basically means that, often a very small number of failure modes are responsible for the vast majority of your downtime, the vast majority of the problems you experience.
Oh, wow.
So if we can identify those, what they call the vital few causes, then we can really focus our efforts where they'll have the biggest impact.
So instead of just, spreading ourselves too thin trying to fix everything, we can focus on those key issues and actually see a much bigger improvement in the overall reliability and availability.
Exactly.
That's brilliant.
It is. And it all comes back to data,
Right.
Having that analysis. And the handbook even shows, how you can use a simple Pareto chart to visually highlight those top failure modes.
Yeah.
And that makes it so much easier to then prioritize those maintenance efforts. It's like, if you've got a leaky boat, you're going to want to find the biggest leaks first and fix those to keep the whole thing afloat.
Oh, that's such a good analogy. I love that.
Right.
This whole deep dive has been really eye-opening. We went from my smart fridge ordering Bitcoin to understanding these complex ideas of system dependability and how this RAMS analysis can actually help keep, well, everything running a little more smoothly.
It's true, yeah. And it's not even just about those big, complex systems, right? I mean, you can apply these principles of RAMs to so many other aspects of life.
Yeah.
I mean, think about, your own personal productivity, how you manage your time, how you manage your own resources. It's all connected.
So by understanding these concepts, we're not just becoming more informed about technology, we're kind of developing this framework for thinking about, efficiency, reliability, risk in all areas of our life.
100%.
It's like a whole new lens.
Exactly.
Well, on that note, I think we've done our deep dive for today. We've gone up enough, maybe even a little too deep. But as always, fascinating stuff. Really appreciate your insights on this.
Yeah, this was fun. Glad we could unpack this together.